Okay. Amy, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So called to order 10:11 a.m. June 23rd. Our first agenda item is to look at the previous meeting minutes, which Nick had sent out. I don't recall when he sent that out, but it was April 28th. I was able to find them. I have them on my home computer screen, not here. So I don't know, Nick, if you want to share.
Why don't I can share my screen.
So we had some conversation about the sergeant's promotional exam, the timeline, the questions for the oral exam, which is actually later on our agenda because I had made some updates to make those questions more behavioral and not updates. I made some suggestions, which I want you guys to weigh in on. We talked a little bit then about the criteria for hiring new officers, which is our next order of business once we get beyond this promotional task. And then that was the bulk of the meeting. We got a quick update about the Citizens Police Academy, and that was that. So I guess we need to vote in order to approve these. So all in favor, aye, or you can use this little thumbs up icon on Zoom if you like that. I guess it's just Matt and I voting, so, right? I mean, well,
Yeah. You can have the alternate.
okay. So Mark and or Matt Lucas, if you want to vote on to approve the minutes, since we have fewer than 3 regular members.
Yeah, just make sure for this meeting that we designate which of the alternates is going to be participating throughout the meeting.
Okay, let's select Mark only because Matt is on vacation and, you know, he's in that vacation mindset. We don't want to ask him to do
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay, I didn't see if people voted. I'm assuming we heard some ayes at least. Any no
Aye.
votes?
Second the motion and vote aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, so that's that. And then hold on, let me pull up the agenda. So next order of business is election of a new chair member and review of personnel board applications. Let's start with the latter part of that. Are we reviewing applications or is that council doing that? And what is the timeline for that process?
We have changed the process somewhat from when you guys went through the selection. Mark, you may have gone through I think you went through the new selection process. We will have the chair of the personnel board, the council liaison, and it'll either be Ryan or myself or Nick involved in the interviews. And then that selection committee will make a recommendation to the full council.
Oh, okay. So we're nowhere close to getting a new member at this time. We still have to do interviews, sounds like.
Yes, yeah. Do the interviews of those, and how many did we get all together, Nick?
I believe 5 total.
Yeah. So we would need to find some time to schedule that. And then, I think my hope would be that we would make those recommendations for action on the July 12th meeting date.
And is that done at town hall as part of a council meeting like it was previously or whenever?
We can set it up through Zoom
Okay,
just to make it as convenient as possible.
okay.
So if I heard you correctly, it's just you and Nick and one other person interviewing them. The council's not involved anymore?
We'll have the council liaison.
Okay,
Yeah, so there's a council liaison, chairperson of the zoning, of the personnel board. And then somebody from staff.
And council liaison would probably be Carolyn, yes, or could it
Correct.
be anyone? Okay. And the staff could either be you or Nick or Chief Hawk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably Nick for sure, and Ryan and I'll flip a coin.
All right.
And the process has worked pretty well for the other selections or the other vacancies that we've had. It's moved a lot faster and we've been able to find good people.
And
Mark,
then
you
we,
went through that interview with Zoom, didn't you, when we selected you?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
yeah, it worked well.
I did.
But
Just in the spirit of full disclosure, I did go ahead and submit an application for the open.
you were cutting out a little bit there, Mark, but we heard you say you submitted an application, which is good. So are we?
Yeah, I'm
when-
having
Yeah, you're kind of choppy.
Yeah, sometimes if you take your camera off, the audio works better, but who knows? Are we also simultaneously selecting our alternate when we select the new regular member, the third regular
yeah,
member?
we'll be able to.
Yeah.
We'll be able to do both.
Okay. And we're making a recommendation to council. Can council disagree with our recommendation and choose someone else entirely?
They could, in theory. I haven't seen it happen yet.
Okay. Okay. So we do interviews of these 5 individuals. I believe both Mark and Matt L. applied.
Yes.
So we will select one of the 5 candidates for the regular position and one of the 5 candidates for our open alternate position if Matt or Mark is selected for the regular. Or maybe I should say in full transparency, assuming one of them would be selected for the regular. I don't know, it's common sense, but just process wise, we would have to select both. Yes. No one's disagreeing, so I'll take
You're
those.
correct.
Yes.
That's my understanding too.
Okay. And then how does the chair work? It's a little bit odd because there's only 2 of us, right? So we're selecting now for either Matt Shipley or I to be the chairperson of this council, or we wait until we get a 3rd member and then select.
This is Falco. That's correct. Only the 2 of you right now would qualify to be the chair. The alternate who's participating today could conceivably vote on that appointment since they're participating as part of the board for today's meeting. But only the full members would be eligible to be the chair.
If we can, just my opinion, it would make sense to have a chair. You know, if we can, it doesn't seem like we shouldn't have somebody with the ball, if that makes sense.
Agreed.
Okay. Matt S., do you have a preference?
yeah, you're running this thing right now. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't continue doing that in the future. You're doing a great job.
I was afraid you would say that.
No, you are doing
Okay.
a great job, Amy.
Oh, thanks. All right, well, I'm willing to serve in that capacity if you guys would like to vote on that.
Does anybody need to nominate you, or is that the nomination? Are we
Oh, that's a
good?
good question. Probably Robert's Rules of Order. Someone would need to
Yeah.
nominate me.
Correct.
Well, yes, I nominated you, but I'll officially do so now.
Okay. Second,
Yes. Aye.
that was Mark. Okay. All in favor, aye.
I,
All opposed, nay. Okay, Matt, I guess that makes you the de facto vice chair, or is that what we call it, vice chair?
Yeah.
Or do we need to officially vote on that as well? Are you already the vice chair, Matt?
no, you were.
Oh, okay. All right, so I nominate Matt Shipley to be the vice chair.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay. All right, so we've accomplished 2 agenda items. Yay. Now let's talk a little bit about the sergeant's promotional exam timetable and update. So I think everyone's aware we had 11 people signed up to take the exam that received the study materials. Oh, whatever length of time we deemed was appropriate, 3 months or thereabouts prior to the June 5th exam. 8 of them showed up on June 5th to take the exam, and I proctored that exam. We have now received their scores, which Chief Hawk has posted to them, and 8 of the 8 who took the exam have passed the exam. So if you recall in the ordinance, that exam counts for 70% of their score. The scores ranged from 73 to 88, if I'm recalling correctly. So there's not a huge range. 70 was the cutoff for passing. Our next step would be the oral interviews, and that will count for 30% of their overall score. So I don't know, Chief, if you've heard reactions from the officers since you had posted the scores, or any comments or anything you wanted to share with us.
At this time, Amy, not much other than just third hand or what have you information that some of the possibly an officer or so with like one of the lower scores, there might be some consideration as to whether they continue on in the process, but I have nothing official as of yet. in that
Okay.
regard.
Okay, thanks. And just so you guys know, the way we posted it was we assigned a number that only they would know. So they could see all of the scores, but they couldn't tell, presumably, whose score was whose other than their own. So that's available to them now. Any questions about that part of what was done?
No.
Okay. So our next order of business is determining how we do the oral interview part of the process. Oh, and by the way, Chief, I did do sort of a mock-up in an Excel spreadsheet about like what kind of score someone would need to get on the oral interview portion. And I believe I write everything down because my memory isn't great, but if I'm recalling correctly, if the top scorer got like a 65 out of 100 on the oral portion and the bottom scorer got like a 95 out of 100 on the oral portion, their overall score would be about the same. So it's conceivable that even the lowest scorer on the oral portion could be our top scorer on the overall portion, even though it's only the 30%.
Okay.
So. So I had circulated some interview questions, and you guys, I'm pulling those up here. You guys can say, you know what, we hate these. We want to go back to the 10 questions we looked at back in April.
Excuse me,
yeah.
I don't, if somebody is monitoring this meeting, we should not be disclosing the actual questions at this point.
Yeah.
So if you want to go through those questions, we should do that in executive session.
Okay, perfect. I was just going to thank you, Falco, for that. I was going to sort of highlight my rationale behind revamping that. It might have seemed like rework or whatever, but my purpose was to get a little bit deeper into each candidate's thinking process and consider some behavioral questions so we could probe a little bit more versus just like, how would you handle this? More along the lines of, tell us about a time when you've done such and such and how did that go? And then we can probe and ask follow-up questions for that. So just sort of high level, when you guys look at that, there's 5 different sections, including scenarios. Each section would be weighted and it would be an overall score of 100. We can then combine that with the written interview scores. I will say there's a lot of questions from a timing perspective. I think we're going to need probably at least 30 to 40 minutes per candidate as we think about scheduling these. And we can decide in an executive session, sounds like, you know, one section has 5 questions. Maybe we choose 3 or 2 or 4 of the 5, for example. So, but we should be consistent in asking every person the same questions. So we should choose up front, if we're going to ask every single question, we need to ask every candidate every single question. So any high level comments or questions about that interview guide?
I like what you did, and I think that we should go into executive session sometime and talk about some of these. In one of the sections I saw, 2 of your questions were very similar, and then there was another one that I was kind of wondering what the point was, but I'm sure there is. Just wanted to discuss some of that stuff.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that feedback. Yeah, well, I really want everyone's input, you know, so let's maybe table the conversation on that specifically. And by the way, I think I just sent it out yesterday, so you guys may have not even had time to look at it, but
Amy, if I could just throw one thing in that's not about specifically the questions. The 30, 40 minutes, once the interviews are scheduled, it would be good to break them up so the interviewers aren't sitting for more than maybe 2 or 3 interviews a day, because they're just going to start to run together.
yeah.
I've had that. So
Oh.
I know that's not a decision we're making right now, but I just wanted to throw it out there for consideration.
Well, no, that's a great segue, because that is a decision we should be making soon, if not now, then soon. And the decision would be which 2 or 3 or 4 of us would participate in the interview process, and then how do we schedule those so that we're not completely over. I mean, we can't do 8 in a row for sure. So I think Matt Shipley and I would be givens for participating in the interview. I would welcome Matt L. and or Mark to join us if you're interested and available. Is that allowable, Bob Falco?
I see no restriction in letting them participate.
Okay. I think the only restriction that I've been aware of from a consistency standpoint is that those people that participate continue that process throughout. So there's consistency.
Yeah.
So that if we have the alternates all there, that everyone's present.
Right. So I think more input is better, but it also causes some scheduling headaches. So we want to think about who's participating and then how and when we're going to schedule those. I'm assuming, Chief Hawk, that we would schedule these when the officers are not on duty. Is that accurate?
I believe historically, Amy, it has been both. If the officer happens to be on the 3 to 11, we make any accommodation we can for them to participate. Ideally off duty, but we have had officers participate on duty if the situation arises.
Oh, so that's allowable. Okay, so we basically set the schedule and say, here's what time it is, and we can shift people around. Like I was thinking, if we do, now I know, Matt, that this might interfere with your schedule since I think you're working in the evenings, but I was thinking perhaps we do like a couple of evenings and one Saturday morning or something to that effect.
Yeah, I would suggest if Nick can put a doodle poll together for like maybe a longer term, whatever window we're looking for the interviews that we can all fill out, and then I can definitely try and make myself available and for what's flexible and what will work for everybody.
Okay, so it sounds like you're willing to participate. What about you, Mark? Would you like to participate in the interview process?
I actually would, because, I'm fairly new to the committee. I'd still like to see how this evolves and this unfolds, so I can use it partially as a learning experience, and maybe I can contribute a little bit based on the fact I've interviewed probably well over 100 people. The one thing I would offer up, just listening in on this dialogue, would be if there's 8 people that are going to go through the interview process and it's 30 to 45 minutes each, I think it's pretty reasonable to think that we could do it in 2 sessions, 2 3 to 4 hour sessions. If you're going to do a Saturday morning, 8 to 12, and maybe one night from 6 to whatever, I think you might be able to get it all done instead of over 3 days. Just thinking about schedules.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be rough.
4 interviews is rough.
Yeah, that would be rough.
I think only from the aspect of the depth of the interview. I mean, if it was a initial hire, it's not as deep of a dive into the candidate. So I think that's kind of where Matt's going with why it would be rough.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
And how long is each interview?
I mean, depending on how many questions we potentially cut out, I would say each will take at least 30 to 40 minutes. And then we want some time, I would think, to sort of debrief immediately afterwards as a group, just so we can say, I heard this answer to this question. Here's how I interpreted that. What did you think? That sort of thing. So I'd say an hour per person would be probably the time frame I would allot. And I agree. I think 4 in a row would be a lot, personally. But if people decide to self-select out of the process and we only have 6, then, maybe, or 7, maybe we could swing it. I don't know. But I think we should try, Nick, in the doodle poll to look for like 3 3-hour blocks to start with and start there.
Yeah. With the intent of doing 1 interview per hour,
Yeah.
3 at a time.
Yeah.
Our block. Yeah.
And then we can slide
I'll
in the
set up a lot.
officers based on their schedules. If someone says I can't be there on Thursday at 8, then we move them to Saturday or whatever.
Yeah.
Chief Hawk might have to help us with that part.
Yeah, and I can certainly work with my colleagues up here. I think that our payroll personnel has the police schedules for each week, and as those change, I'll make sure the officers we're interviewing are available at that time. So
Okay, so that's a good question. I would prefer to do more sessions, but closer together, so not spread this out over 2-3 weeks. I think by the time we get to the last person, I will have forgotten the first. Even though I'm going to try to take notes, but. Is there a week that everyone's here and we could target, like, today's, so like maybe, I don't know, July 5th or July 12th, like. Well, let me ask more specifically, is everyone around the week of July 5th?
Yes.
Holiday weekend, so that's probably, I'm going to be around, but I don't know how many people will be.
Oh, that's a good point. The 5th is a holiday. So how about July 12th? How does that look for everyone?
I'm actually on a staycation that week, so I'll be around the whole week. It might be worth looking at or considering maybe the tail end of the week of the 4th, so like 8th, 9th, 10th, and then bleed into that second week, so that if there's officers that are away on vacation, they're not missing out on the process because they're away.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I do agree that keeping them grouped together, so that we're knocking them all out in a span of 5-6 days, I think that's a good idea.
And having more sessions gives us more flexibility for scheduling people.
That's true.
So Mark, does that time frame work for you? You in town, available I mean, not every single day, but
Yeah, it does. I'm opening up both of our offices at Highmark in the next week or two. So I'm opening up Pittsburgh and I'm opening up Tampa. So I am going to be traveling 3 weeks out of the next 5, but I actually happen to be around the week of the 5th and the week after that. Other than that, I'm not going to be in Pittsburgh
oh, wow. Okay.
until the middle of August.
Let me just weigh in pick up on something that Bob had mentioned. Whichever alternate is going to actually be part of the interview itself in terms of rating the candidates, that person needs to be consistent throughout all of the interviews. So even though the other alternate may participate, they're not going to be actually scoring the candidates officially for purposes of their overall oral interview score. So that should still be determined based on each alternate's availability as well. And I'm assuming that we're going to be completing these interviews long before we have the third full member appointed to the board. So in considering which alternate needs to be available, that person, whoever we pick, needs to be part of the oral interviews for all 8 candidates.
Falco, are you saying that we can only have three people interviewing? We can't have 4?
You can have a 4th person monitoring or participating as an observer, but it's only the 3 full members that can actually participate in the interview itself.
Got it.
Okay, that's important. That's good to know. So
It
I
sounds
guess-
like I'm sorry, Amy, it sounds like the doodle poll is going to be critical to figuring out that then, because it's going to come strictly from availability.
well, or were you saying, Falco, there needs to be consistency in who attends all of the interviews and consistency in the 3 people that do the rating? Or is it okay if the 4th person who isn't necessarily rating is at 4 of the 8 interviews, for example?
The second thing that you said.
Okay,
Yes. So yeah, whoever's going to be part of the 3 members actually conducting the interview, they need to be consistent throughout the whole interview process. If the second alternate can monitor some but not all the interviews, that's not as critical.
okay. If Matt and Mark have equal availability, I don't know how to select. I don't know if someone feels more strongly or if we should choose the alternate that's been on the longest. And I don't even know who that is, by the way, but any other ideas of how to choose who that 3rd rater is?
Amy, from my perspective, I don't have a preference either way. I'm comfortable with Matt. Matt has been here longer. But either way, I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable being an observer or being a participant.
Okay,
I think what Matt Lucas said was that availability is really going to drive this thing, and he's probably right.
yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, is everyone comfortable doing these interviews in person? That would be my preference, but if there's concerns about not, and can we do them at town hall, or what kind of location availability do we have, Bob?
Town hall, I would recommend town hall. The council chambers in the smaller room. And so we will just make that available. However you guys want to work that.
Okay.
That out.
Matt, you okay with that?
Matt Shipley is, yes.
Yeah, Matt and Mark, you guys too?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree in person is definitely the preferable way to do it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, these are critical enough that it would make sense to meet in person.
Okay. Any other comments, questions on the interview process?
Amy, if I may for a minute, just wondering what you all think about me asking the officers' schedules. If you guys decide on a week, I mean, it's obviously their obligation, the process, they should make themselves available. But if, let's just say someone like has out of country plans during that week, shall I ask those 8 candidates if they have any plans they cannot move? Vacations scheduled or otherwise?
I don't know that I would do that now. I'd wait until we get some time slots. And if none of the time slots works for one individual, I think we could always do a one-off.
Okay.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
Would
Well,
it be,
what would hurt if they kind of just ask what the general, vacation plans are right now? Would that hurt anything?
That's true.
But
I may
we
be
can
getting,
compare that against a doodle poll. too.
yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, Bob, is if there would be a doodle poll for the candidates or their availability that would be separate from ours, and then we can see how that matches.
I can send that out. I have the 8 individuals, I believe, that have passed the exam. And I can send out a separate poll just to make sure that they're available broadly during that week.
Yeah, that could be a
Yeah,
yes,
just
no.
set the same parameters
Yeah,
for date, that date range.
Were you just going to do those 2 weeks then for the date range? The week of the 4th and the 11th? Or 5th and 12th?
I certainly can. Yeah, I mean, we
Yeah,
want
I was throwing out that, I'm sorry, to Amy, is if that's the range of time that she was looking at.
I was thinking, or someone suggested, I can't remember who, like end of the first week, maybe the 7th through the 14th or thereabouts.
That's almost exactly what I was thinking, Amy.
And then if we need to extend it out further, we could, if we don't get enough, 3-hour time slots, maybe. Well, if we do, actually 3 3-hour time slots would be good, because then we use that last hour to discuss and, if we need it, compare and contrast and go back and discuss things from previous candidates. So that's what I'd be looking for, Nick, is 3-hour time slots in that week or thereabouts. And like I said, if we need to extend it past July 14th, we could do that. But I'd start there and see if we can find some commonality there.
Yeah.
And it sounds
Hey,
like, oh, sorry.
Amy, not to interrupt here, but just from correspondence I have from Carolyn, she has to go here in a couple of minutes. Is there anything that we need her approval input on for council member Schweiger here?
Well, yeah, so if we go back to the first comment about electing our 3rd member, I guess we need to find a time in common that we can interview those people, those 5 candidates.
Nick, go ahead and set up another doodle poll since you're becoming the doodle master. And
So yeah, so I'll set up one for our interviewers and our police officer interviewees for around the same parameters like you said.
okay.
Yeah.
And before,
But
I'd just like to say that I'm concerned about the number of police on the force. So I'd like to see that the process for hiring a new police officer happens quickly, because as we promote somebody to sergeant, that's going to really put a crimp into the personnel that we have available to man the shifts.
Yeah, I think
Understood.
Chief Hawk have any thoughts on that?
Just give him 2 thumbs up. Matt has made that point, I think, previously, that it'll create a backfill, need for a position when you promote an officer to sergeant. Certainly ideally would like to fill that spot.
yeah,
Fielding 3 shifts a day, obviously can be a challenge in the town as things continue to escalate and such. We're getting into the summer months and such, and folks coming out of COVID stuff. There certainly have concerns there, and I would like to field a full team. Absolutely, 100% behind that.
in this process, it wasn't short, but the hiring process will last even longer. So, ideally, if we get this wrapped up by the end of July, we can start in August with putting together a list for hiring.
Makes sense.
So we had talked last time at our last meeting about Chief Hawk. I think everyone, and tell me if I'm speaking, if I'm not reflecting what you thought, but it sounded to me like everyone was interested in the chief's perspective on the candidates. And we had some conversation about how best to do that. And as I recall, Falco had recommended that the chief put together 3 or 4 sentences about each candidate, run that past him, and then we could share that in writing with the interviewers. Am I recalling those details accurately?
That's what I recall.
Okay.
And in the past, Amy, the chief has put together a little, just factual information on each officer, work history, and such, maybe training, specialized, training and such that each candidate has, so that you folks have an idea of, who's presenting in front of you.
Yep. And, this is going to be hard to do factually, but I would want your perspective as well about leadership potential. I mean, these guys, they're all guys, much better than we do by virtue of working with them day in, day out. So I don't know how you do that if you're only allowed to have facts, but I certainly would like your perspective about, are they respected by their peers currently? Would they be respected as a leader? Those sorts of viewpoints.
Understood. And anything that, Falco or would say is reasonable or I'm willing to provide anything that we're able to provide in that regard, whether it's, in writing or, I don't know if it would be appropriate or not to sit down with the personnel board prior to that and just, discuss each candidate briefly. I'm open to whatever makes sense.
And I think the intent would have to be to try to maintain some consistencies, just like we're doing with the oral interviews, same questions, that the same information as objectively as possible is being presented by the chief on those more subjective perceptions of their abilities. So I can work with the chief on that.
And is it okay to have a conversation with the chief about that, Falco, or is only written allowable?
We probably should have this discussion more in executive session.
Okay. Okay. So, Nick, add that to your doodle poll. We need one for the interviewing of new members. We need one for, in the very near term, probably the most urgent is executive session on the interview questions and the format of, and maybe content of what we want from Chief Hawk. And then we need the third around the actual interviews.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm not sure what everyone's availability is today, but of course you could have an executive session immediately after this public portion of the meeting. I actually do have a meeting scheduled, another Zoom call at 11, so it kind of would make it difficult because I'm sure we want to drill down more into those issues, but I can see if I can push that back while we're having this discussion, if everyone else is available.
I'm available until about 11:45.
I'm available.
I can stick around.
Okay, let me see what I can do.
Stick around too.
Okay. Okay, sorry, going back to the agenda.
National Night Out updates with the police department, I believe, is next.
Okay, so who is that, Chief Hawk?
Certainly. We continue to try to hammer down finite details with that, approaching businesses about, some of the longstanding ones and the larger ones about any potential sponsorships or anything they might want to, programs in place where they may have a donation or something for the cause, following up with groups as far as having attendees that evening that makes sense for any community members that might come down. And really, it's just a matter of we continue to plan for it. It's scheduled for August 3rd, 5 to 8 here at the town hall, an opportunity for the community to engage with their police department. But Mr. Grimm could jump in if he'd like, but we're also going to try to highlight first responders in general, to have fire department participate, EMS. Really want to engage with the community and have the children down and give them an opportunity to talk to the officers and the first responders in general. Obviously, it's National Night Out. It's nationally. It's our first. This will be our first foray into it, and really looking forward to it. Hopefully, folks are coming out of COVID and can come down here and connect with us.
Yeah, you folks will be more than welcome to attend. I don't know that there's necessarily anything official that you would need to be doing that evening, but it's certainly a good opportunity to potentially interact on a more casual basis with some of the officers. And obviously, if anybody has questions regarding our process, that you'd be available too to talk. But it's just a night for the police to have some good positive interaction with the public. And again, you guys are welcome to be there.
Have you set a date and time yet?
August 3rd is the date for the National Night Out, Matt. Now, it's like I said, it's a national event apparently, and they try to stick with that day, that evening. It's a Tuesday night. There's a rumor that the town manager may be grilling free hot dogs for everyone.
Probably more than a rumor. So
They sound like some pretty grim hot dogs.
eat before you get there, just in case.
Yeah, they sound like they're pretty grim hot dogs.
Yeah, they really are. Like, I haven't
this
heard
point,
that
we
one
should-
before, Matt.
So at this point, we should just save the date, but there's no immediate or long-term action.
No, I mean, I want to say this, right. You guys are putting enough time and effort in with the police department. Just come and enjoy yourselves if you want to.
All right, sounds good. Next agenda is rules of procedure for police appointment. Rule 2 of 137.05, the town ordinance. I don't have the town ordinance up, but can anyone tell me what this is or why we need to discuss it?
I think that I kept this on the agenda, Amy. I wasn't sure if the discussion that we had last time concluded or not.
Oh, was this the selection criteria discussion? Yes.
Yes. The yeah, and kind of the rules and qualifications for police officers and such.
New hires, you mean?
Yeah, new hires.
Ah, okay. I think that we finished that. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. But I think I remember talking about age. I remember talking about military service.
Educational background, whether or not they
Yeah.
4-year degree.
So what would be our next steps here? Do we need to put this into like here's the current, here's what we recommend, and send it through council?
Yes, that would be your next step.
Okay.
Because we would have to, since it's in the code, we would need to put together an ordinance to update that. So it would just be, in my mind, a recommendation of the personnel board for making those changes, maybe some rationale behind it, and then let the council review that.
Okay. All right, so I will take point on putting that in writing. Falco, may I send that via email since it was already discussed, just for people to weigh in and say, yes, this reflects what we discussed, or no, I understood this to be different, or is that something we need to put on the agenda for our next meeting?
No, you can do that as long as each person is communicating to you individually as opposed to a group email response. And I also remember that Chaz had done a summary. I think he had actually done a red line, with changes from prior discussions. Not sure if that incorporated the April meetings discussions, but that document was also out there and is probably in your email. Yeah, as a good beginning point.
Oh, good. Okay. I didn't recall that, but I'll take a look.
That's what I remembered, is that Chaz had it pretty much summed up from that last discussion.
Good.
If
Okay.
you don't have that, Amy, I'm sure I can track that down.
Okay, thank you.
Alright.
Yeah, I'll look for it, send it out again. Everyone can reply to me individually, yes or no, and we'll go from there. And then, Bob, you would take that to council on our behalf?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I'd be happy to.
All right. Citizens Police Academy, what's going on there?
Apologies, Amy, I'm working around a self-calibrating printer, so hope you can all hear me. Sergeant Guzzo and I are trying to nail down a final schedule and line up any guest speakers we might have regarding that. Not sure if we've discussed it, but we're going to run it from probably around mid-September through mid-November, 8 weeks. It might be a field trip or two in there. We're probably going to line up a training for one of those evenings for any of these academy recruits, so to speak, where we would put them through some very realistic training, put them, in the boots of an officer on the street that is in varying situations and varying degrees of use of force and such. I'm excited that we can hopefully offer that as part of it, so that the average person can kind of really feel what it might be like to be an officer on the street, and those split-second decisions that they have to make. But we're also hopeful that on National Night Out, we will have some applications there, and kind of it's an opportunity to promote that Citizens Academy when folks are down here for National Night Out. So prior to the 8 weeks that we're going to run this, we are going to have I believe here towards the end of July, we will start probably about a month-long period that should extend through about mid-August, where it'll be a period where folks can apply. We're hoping to accept 20 or so individuals from the community and finalize that list sometime after mid-August, whenever the application period closes.
And remind me, this is adults only, like age 18 plus, or?
Yes, ma'am. At this time, that's the plan right now. If that's successful, we could, probably discuss anything, I think if you go under 18, obviously you're talking about juveniles, and you might have a whole different set of circumstances, and we'd have to probably come up with a different curriculum and program. So for now, it is focusing on adults 18 and older, and town residents, would be preferred and probably exclusive to town residents unless we couldn't fill a class for some reason.
Once a week for 8 weeks? Is that what you said?
Yeah, right now we're talking about like a Thursday evening, like 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., depending on the content and such. That might go less than 3 hours or maybe slightly over, but that's the ballpark. We're shooting for Thursday evenings once a week, 6 to 9.
Okay. Something I might be interested in.
Absolutely.
All right, so I know we're at 11. Falco, were you able to push your other meeting?
I just got a response that they're going to start without me, that I don't need to join until 11:30.
Okay. All right, so let's try to wrap this up and then we'll move to the executive session, but we still have one more agenda item. I don't think we have any public on here, but any other business or comments? Okay, hearing none, I motion to, what's the term? Close the meeting. I forget the terminology.
Adjourn the meeting.
Adjourn.
Adjourn
Thank you.
executive session.
And to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters.
Thank you.
And as long as it's okay, I'll keep us all on the same call here. I will just end the recording.
Correct.
Good.
And you can confirm, Nick or Bob, that there is no other public on the call right now?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, we had a motion, we had a second. All in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Okay, adjourning at 11:02 a.m.